GoldenEye, GoldenEye, GoldenEye. In many ways, the biggest blessing and simultaneously the biggest curse of the James Bond video game canon. The blessing side of it is obviously that the game was a smash hit, received rave reviews, became the third best-selling N64 game ever, and left a cultural impact that most movie tie-in games can only dream of. It spawned a variety of cash-in imitators, had the honor of a full-on re-release, which is a testament to the incredible legacy it left behind. It's frequently touted as one of the greatest video games of all time, and have you really made it if you don't have a dozen plus contrarian clickbait articles about how GoldenEye wasn't that great, actually? Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. No one can deny what GoldenEye did for both video games in general, as well as 007's presence in pop culture. I have no doubt that we would not have half the Bond games that we currently have had GoldenEye not been the smash hit that it was. And yet, a big part of the curse of GoldenEye is that it left such a huge shadow that pretty much every single Bond game that comes after it is compared with it, and the best praise it seems you can give any successive Bond game is that, well, it's second best to GoldenEye. I have no doubt that if you ask 95% of hardcore gamers what the best Bond game is, they'd say GoldenEye. And yet, if you were to ask that same question of a hardcore Bond fan, I'd say you're much more likely to get a different response. I love GoldenEye to bits, but the technology of the time being what it was, that I don't know if you ever really feel like you're truly playing through a Bond film. It doesn't have a lot of the tropes and structure that you normally associate with the Bond movie experience. Now, obviously, a game is a game and a film is a film. One doesn't necessarily need to feel like the other, but when it comes to Bond, my favorite 007 games tend to be the ones that make me feel like I'm actually playing as James Bond through an adventure, just like the ones I see on the movie screen. There are a variety of games that fit that bill: Everything or Nothing, Bloodstone, and NightFire. The game was showcased with an original trailer at EA's booth at E3 in 2002, as you can see if you squint at this video recorded from the venue at that time. It was slated for release later that year to time with the 40th anniversary of the film series, which of course climaxed with the release of Die Another Day, or should that be anti-climaxed? And yet, rather than produce a tie-in game following the same plot as that film, EA Games and developers Eurocom sought to create an original James Bond story. Originally titled James Bond in Phoenix Rising, NightFire EA producer Joel Wade told IGN way back in August 2002, "NightFire is particularly exciting because we've been able to craft our own original story working with MGM and Danjaq, owners of the James Bond franchise. Creating an original fiction allows us to do two things that we aren't able to do with a movie-based game. First, we were able to create incredible moments designed for the best possible gameplay experiences from the very beginning. Sometimes amazing sequences in the movies don't play as well in-game or are simply too difficult for the game engine to pull off. With our own story, we crafted our game design first and wove the story through it, letting the game and fiction play off each other until we hit the perfect mix." Indeed, NightFire feels like the culmination of all that EA Games learned from their previous Bond games. 007 Racing and Agent Under Fire both had original stories, but they lacked some of the traditional Bond cinematic elements to truly make them feel like genuine Bond adventures. NightFire has just the right level of polish and Bondian feel, and that's right down to having James Bond of the day, Pierce Brosnan's likeness in the main role, though not his voice. I mean, heck, even getting his likeness for the game seemed to be a fairly last-minute thing, with Joel Wade again speaking to IGN in August 2002. Last month, we were fortunate enough to have a few minutes of Pierce Brosnan's time while he was shooting pickup scenes for the new movie. We flew a laser digitizer over to Pinewood Studios and actually cyber-scanned his head. It's weird to think that we were just a few months away from potentially having the Agent Under Fire Bond model back for another game. In the GBA version, you can even still see that Bond's face in a couple of the cutscene stills early into the game, but securing Brosnan's voice as well as likeness was clearly a mission too much for the day, and Maxwell Caulfield of Grease 2 fame was brought in to lend his voice to the character. Speaking with Mark Edlitz in the excellent The Many Lives of James Bond, "I feel that to get my opinion of the experience of playing the fabled James Bond as a voiceover actor is a stretch. There's nothing to it, really. You're reading lines off a tightly formatted script in tandem with the structure of an intricately constructed video game. Of course, you have to have the suitable tone and inflection and bring a certain nuance of character to the recording booth, but you're hardly living out a Bondian fantasy. Far better to be narrating an audiobook of one of the original Ian Fleming novels, all of which I read as a very early adolescent."
The name's Bond. James Bond.
I'm still not entirely sure whether Caulfield is doing his best Pierce Brosnan impression there or doing his own Bond thing, but whatever, his voice works with Brosnan's likeness really well. And while I do love an original Bond model for video games, there's no doubting that Brosnan's likeness does lend the game a certain authenticity, as well as makes the marketing department's job a hell of a lot easier. The console version of NightFire released on GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation 2 in November 2002, and after years of careful, dedicated, and considered development, was largely actually met with a, yeah, it's pretty good response. 7 and 8s out of 10s galore, and obviously the overriding sentiment expressed throughout multiple outlets was, of course, it's good, but it ain't no GoldenEye. And yet the game has gone on to be held in high regard amongst Bond fans since its release, and as I say, I know many a Bond fan who will cite it as their favourite of all the 007 games, and I myself am in that camp, but trying to explain that to a non-Bond fan who may only have vague memories of playing NightFire can be tough. Hey, do you want to play some GoldenEye? Sure, and maybe afterwards we can play some NightFire. What the f*** is that? So what's a guy to do other than create a 2-hour-long video talking about how much he loves a decades-old licensed video game? This is my dissertation, my case for why NightFire is quite possibly still the best Bond game ever made. So grab your 6th generation controller and dust off the old memory card as we go level by level through NightFire. The game begins in the most Bondian way possible. When loading it up for the first time, you get a couple of logos, and then no main menu, no tedious admin, no precious minutes wasted trying to think of an amusing save file name, just straight into the story complete with gun barrel sequence and opening cinematic. So it's New Year's Eve in Paris, as if you couldn't tell by this lady's enthusiastic jubilation, but there's no lively arm throwing to be had for James Bond, who is flying around in a helicopter trying to locate French intelligence agent Dominique Paradis, who herself is on the tail of an armoured van laden with explosives intent on destroying the Eiffel Tower. The level is split into 2 distinct sections, the first involving taking out Dominique's pursuers with a sniper rifle from the helicopter, and the second segment sees Bond behind the wheel of an Aston Martin Vanquish speeding through the streets of Paris to stop the bomb going off. When playing for the first time on a console without prior save files of the game, this very much plays as a tutorial for some of the basic controls. It's a somewhat on-rails experience teaching you how to shoot and where best to aim to disable the vehicles with the sniper rifle. Controls are far less limited on replays though, which is great, and I love that this isn't just a bog-standard tutorial, because honestly, this is such an awesome way to kick off the game. It totally plays like the kind of action-packed mini-adventures that we see Bond on in the pre-title sequences of most of the films. Firing at cars from a moving helicopter is just so cool, and I love that there are a variety of ways to take enemies out. You can just keep relentlessly blasting at them until they explode, or you can aim at the fuel tanks to blow them up in one shot, or you can shoot the tires. And oh my god, if there's one thing that the EA era Bond games love more than anything else, it's shooting out tires on cars. The amount of Bond moves that you can acquire by shooting out the tires on cars in this level alone is unbelievable. I should specify, Bond moves are certain actions that you can perform to increase your scores at the end of levels. Each mission has a handful of moments where if you do a certain thing in a certain way, you hear a little musical punctuation and a gold 007 appears. The idea of these things is that you achieve them by thinking outside of the box, thinking like Bond would think. Maybe you notice a stealthy alternate route into a building, or a spot where you can use a gadget to trigger a certain action. It's this kind of mechanic that really helps separate Bond games from regular first-person shooters, I think, and it's just a really nice bit of punctuation to reward thinking outside of the box. Hearing a quick blast of the Bond theme, seeing that gold logo pop up at the top of the screen, it makes me wish that the movies adopted this as standard. And according to EA-published Bond games, if there's one thing bound to make you feel like Bond, it's shooting out tires on cars. So, I mean, seriously, you get 4 Bond moves in this level alone for doing that. But given that it can be a little tricky to get it just right, it is nice to have a little reward for doing that. It can be a bit of a challenge to get all 4 of these moves, given that you're in a moving helicopter, the targets are moving at speed, and you don't have all that many opportunities to get it right, really. Easier difficulties are more forgiving, obviously, but if you're playing this on the hardest setting, you really can't let any enemy slip by, otherwise Dominique will be toast. Or in this case, I guess French toast. I've always found one of the weirder quirks of this level is a short multi-option cutscene towards the start of it. There are 2 cars chasing Dominique, and if you hit the tires on one of them, you get a little cutscene of the cars colliding as you collect your Bond move. If you just destroy one of the cars rather than pop the tires, though, there's this little cutscene where the remaining goon transport just collides with some random van. I don't want to live without my friend! Mon Dieu! The on-rails shooting element of the level ends, and then we get another cutscene, and I just want to say that I really love the cinematics in this game. It kind of makes me want a fully animated James Bond movie at some point. I just love the music. They use the Bond theme so bombastically, like this moment to mark the appearance of the Aston Martin Vanquish as Bond rescues Dominique.
Can I offer you a lift? closer. Almost there, 007.
And yes, this scene marks the appearance of Q into the game. Of course, this Q does not bear any resemblance to the Q of that time, which would have been John Cleese, but I am slightly surprised that they opted to go for a completely new look with the character rather than reuse the R character model from the previous game, Agent Under Fire. But whatever, it's cool seeing the character get in on the action, and I love the couple of small moments. He's like ducking and dodging while controlling the Aston Martin remotely, and how pleased with himself he is when he performs this wheelie, and he even gets the Bond theme to mark the moment. Like, Q himself has unlocked his own Bond move here.
The stolen device is in that truck. If we hurry, we can still catch it. By the way, who are you?
The name's Bond. James Bond.
And I'm sorry to bring it up, but your hair appears to be glued to your face. The second part of the level is a driving segment, of course, featuring the Vanquish itself, which was the Bond car of the day, featuring in 2002's Dine of the Day. And this is so much fun, just upping the ante from the previous segment, zipping through the streets of Paris on the tail of a bomb-laden truck, using gadgets, missiles, machine guns to fend off baddies. It's brilliant. My only minor criticism is that aside from switching between missiles and guns, gadgets themselves are only prompted at certain moments. You can't do the wheelie or booster whenever you want. You have to wait until the game allows you to. It's not a biggie, obviously, but a part of the reason why I love the driving levels in Agent Under Fire is because of how much freedom they give you. You could run out of EMPs and boosters and so on, and it gave it that extra bit of a challenge that you could just use the gadgets whenever you wanted, whereas here it feels like it's a bit more on rails as a result. But hey, I'm having fun regardless. It's a great time playing through this level. Events come to a close when you either disable the truck with an EMP charge or don't, in which case the Eiffel Tower is no more. The only thing this level is missing is a cameo from everyone's favourite Frenchman, Monsieur Aubergine, having dinner at the Eiffel Tower before getting completely blown up. The guy just can't get a break whenever he visits his favourite French landmark eatery, can he? Cheers. Bond and Dominique toast in the new year and the level is over, but of course there are plenty of incentives to replay on the various difficulties. You have Operative, Agent, and 00 Agent to choose from, and then there are Bronze to Platinum medal targets to aim for. Obviously Bond moves give you more points, as does dispatching a good amount of enemies, having good accuracy, having a lot of health remaining, completing the levels in a good time, etc. But the real things that will get you those Platinum medals are the 007 bonuses and the difficulty bonuses. The latter especially. Operative difficulty gives you no bonus, Agent doubles your subtotal, while 00 Agent will triple your score. With some of the earlier levels you can get Platinum awards without the need to go for the hardest difficulty, but later levels absolutely require it for those bumped up scores. Now, 007 bonuses are different to Bond moves. These are the gold tokens that are scattered around levels, and if you collect them all successfully, you will get a hefty bonus. But the catch is, unlike Bond moves, you absolutely need to hit the target amount, or you get nothing. Paris Prelude has 4 007 bonuses present throughout the driving segment of the level, and they're all really quite clear and visible. The only way to miss them really is if you're going by so fast that you just fly right by them, which is actually quite easy to do on this particular level. God damn it, seriously? For your troubles on this particular level, you can unlock multiplayer skins for classic villains Jaws and Renard. There is an upgrade to the Vanquisher's missiles available, and achieving at least a bronze medal on each level secures you a reward card. This one featuring Dominique. They're completely useless. Think of them like James Bond NFTs. You ever thought about getting on the blockchain, eh? Now, if you're playing this without a previous save file present on your console, the level ends and then it goes straight into an opening title sequence, further emulating a standard trope of the cinematic James Bond, and this game even has its own title song, Nearly Civilized by Esthero. I adore that they went to the effort of producing this. It's a really nicely designed piece, and I actually really like the song. I don't know if the lyrics are especially Bondian. There's a lot in here about tearing down buildings, though, and I guess that Bond is something of a demolition expert. I'd be surprised if the song was written specifically for the game. It just strikes me as something that, like, a demo track that Esthero might have just had lying around, and hey, we need a Bond theme, okay, I'll pick that up, dust it off, and here you go, there's your Bond theme. But either way, I do like the song very much. I think there's a lot of cool imagery in the sequence too, and I love that it ends with this kind of space fighter gun barrel pointing towards Earth. Now we finally get to the main menu, featuring an eerily moving Pierce Brosnan. I will never forget the day that I was playing this game with friends, and this was months after it came out, and one of us suddenly noticed that he was swaying like he was 8 martinis in, but holding it together to get past the bouncer, and we all shuffled forward towards the screen to examine the pixels to see if he was indeed actually moving. Time to select an amusing codename and get into the game proper, what I probably consider to be one of the best Bond game levels of all time, The Exchange, beginning of course with a briefing cinematic with M.
Good evening, 007. A redesigned piece of missile guidance hardware intended for the orbiting US space weapons platform has been stolen. NATO has advised that recovery is critical. Should an unfriendly power reverse engineer this device, the platform's global defense capabilities would be severely compromised. Recent intelligence implicates Raphael Drake in the theft. Hard to believe, as Drake is a respected green industrialist whose Phoenix International dismantles obsolete atomic reactors and decommissions nuclear arsenals. An Allied agent planted in Drake's organization reports that Alexander Mayhew, a British expatriate who heads Phoenix's Japanese branch, is en route to Drake's castle in Austria. The stolen guidance device will change hands tonight during a formal gathering at the castle.
I do love the implication that M now has an office in the Houses of Parliament, though I guess that the game was being put together in that gap in between The World's Not Enough and Die Another Day, and obviously the MI6 building was attacked in that former film, so I suppose maybe there was some uncertainty as to whether James Bond would ever even return to that building, so the game makers edged the bets.
Or maybe M is just now a member of Parliament. I mean, it's not uncommon for politicians to have second jobs, am I right?
Bond Halo jumps into the grounds of Drake's castle, and now I know obviously this is a 20-plus-year-old game at this point, graphics have come a long way, but I still think this level looks pretty damn gorgeous. The mood, the lighting, it's really polished, and I think that this point in the Bond game oeuvre, back in 2002, no other Bond game had looked as good as this. This thing clearly had a lot of effort put into it, and it shows. The first objective is to breach the castle walls, and quite brilliantly, there's not just one way of doing this. While not exactly an open-world sandbox-style game, NightFire does provide players multiple routes and options in a variety of places, and The Exchange introduces that mechanic wonderfully. There is, of course, the blunt instrument approach, just storm the castle entrance and mow down everyone in your path. On an easier difficulty, I'd say this is a perfectly viable option, but as you get into the harder modes, your health can deplete pretty quickly, which at this stage of the level, this early in, is not advisable. Probably the easiest option available to the player is to jump into the back of a passing wine delivery truck and just stay crouched and keep quiet, and you'll breeze into the castle with ease. It's a minor miracle it's not a vodka shipment. I dread to think what would happen in that case. I've got 20 cases of vodka for Mr. Drake.
What?
Certainly the most sprawling option involves actually making your way around the castle on ledges, dodging guards in third person in a few places, as an excuse for EA Games to show off that they actually have a Pierce Brosnan likeness in this game, unlike the previous Agent Under Fire. This is probably the most difficult of the routes, which is a bit odd in all honesty, as it's kind of the hardest one to find and ends up putting you in, I think, a more challenging location in the next zone. But yeah, from the starting point, there's this ledge which you can follow down into a valley, and then you need to grapple up to the castle and follow this ledge all the way around to a secluded back entrance. I'll never forget when I discovered this for the first time playing the game as a kid. I must have played this level dozens upon dozens of times, and I was just doing some random exploring, and initially I thought I was going off-map completely with this route. Like, this ledge is so small and precarious and unsignposted, I really didn't think it was intended to be travelled upon, and then turning this corner and realising, oh wait, there's actually a whole half of this level that I didn't even realise existed.
Good God.
It's a fun journey around the castle. There are wires to climb along and opportunities to use the grapple gadget, which is cool. Probably the trickiest aspect of the route is evading the detection of these snow guards. Success in this endeavour will bag you a Bond move. Failure sets off the alarm and attracts guards from the watchtower, which is sadly not accessible by regular means, or at least I've never been able to get there. And just a sidebar for a moment while this is on screen, I do love that the blood dribble made a return to this game after being conspicuously absent from Agent Under Fire. It always blows my mind slightly when Bond games don't feature the blood dribble when you die. I mean, its usage is surprisingly not obligatory, but it's surely one of the easiest bits of Bond iconography to sneak into a game, I would have thought. Anyway, as I say, depending on which route you took, in the next level zone, you can start in a number of places. Just marching up to the gate places you here, sneaking in the wine truck gets you here, and the back entrance gets you here. Personally, I've always found the most efficient route is the wine truck route. You get to terrify this old man by committing murder right before his very eyes, and it allows you easy access to a certain degree of stealth for the rest of the level. Taking out these two guards is easy, and a well-executed kill of this guard standing by a fountain triggers this strange little verbal Easter egg.
I'd give that dive a 3, actually.
I wish that there were little more moments like that throughout the game, like these totally unsignposted things that if you do, you just get a little Bond witticism. I think it's nice and helps separate, again, it helps make this feel like it could only be a James Bond video game. Getting into this small guardhouse provides ammo, armor, and an opportunity to use your laser watch to cut the upcoming searchlights, and following this route up the stairs allows you to take down a group of snipers with great ease. A key feature of the game is that it allows you to perform non-lethal takedowns. Basically, if you approach an unalerted enemy from behind, they surrender. Now, it's perfectly permissible to just shoot them point blank when they do this, but the game actually encourages you to rather subdue them with a punch, though the crunching sound that comes from some of these punches makes you question just how non-lethal this is. I mean, I'm alright. My skull's detached from my spine, but I'm alright. Enemies still disappear as they do if you shoot them, though you are rewarded in your final mission stats depending on how many opponents you subdued or caused to surrender, and the points per enemy is much greater than the points you get for merely dispatching them, so well worth doing to achieve those higher scores. With the snipers dispatched and the searchlights off, it's a fairly breezy jump, skip, turn a couple of corners, and make your way to the end of this particular zone as Bond suits up and heads into the party. That's the easiest of the approaches, or at least the most hassle-free in my mind. If you come in the back entrance, you're technically starting the zone closer to the party entrance, but you're having to pass through the courtyard directly beneath the searchlights and the snipers. As a result, I've always found this route to be the hardest, though I suppose it's technically quicker if you do it right. If you're not bothered about efficiency and just fancy a stroll about taking out some goons, this is a surprisingly big map with multiple courtyards and passages, and again, I just enjoy having an environment to explore without feeling as though I'm on one set path. It can be as stealthy or as explosive as you want to play, and that's very cool, though it must be said that the scoring metric certainly favors stealth and non-lethal takedowns, so sadly there's no explosion bonus, which, being a Brosnan-era Bond game, you'd think really would be an option. Anyway, on to the party, where guns and punching are not allowed. Good to see that you can still use your laser watch, though. Perfectly reasonable party etiquette there, I should say. Well, as I was saying, the market is quite lucrative at the moment. We're quite lucky that the economy is very much on our side. Stop that. There isn't a whole lot to do in this segment, you just need to stroll through and find a decent vantage point to hear Drake's address to his guests, which is seemingly comprised of identical-looking men and unbelievably horny women.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Hi there.
But there are two figures of seeming importance to interact with here, and how do you tell they're important? Well, their faces aren't copied and pasted, for one thing. First is this enigmatic lady Kiko, stood watching the snowfall.
I'm waiting for someone.
Didn't ask, don't care. And then there's the incredibly rude, not Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson here.
I'm busy.
I mean, Christ, his name is Rook. It's literally one letter away from rock. Bond makes his way to Drake's speech, and it becomes clear that Dominique, from the opening level, is the deep cover agent in the man's organization.
Your generous gifts have ensured the success of our World Refugee Fund. Once again, my gratitude to all for making the journey here. And now, cocktails are waiting for you in the salon.
Oh, finally, booze.
Let's get rattled, my darling.
I have business to attend to. Plead the hostess, won't you, darling?
Jesus, great hiding spot there, James. Yeah, completely blended in with the environment. Time to head to the library to rendezvous with Dominique. As you make your way there, you can catch a glimpse of Kiko and not The Rock heading into a private area together. Once in the library, Bond meets the deep cover agent and...
James. Oh.
Wow, okay, James, it's her job to go deep, not yours.
Sorry to interrupt your debriefing, 007. Agent Nightshade, CIA.
Now, this obviously won't mean anything to anyone who didn't play the previous Bond game, Agent Under Fire, but Zoe Nightshade was a very prominent character in that game, the main Bond girl of it, and, you know, I have no doubt that maybe her inclusion here is just because, oh hey, we have this cool model, we can just reuse it again, we don't have to create a new character from scratch, but just that little bit of continuity I really appreciate. I really love that this character made a reappearance in this game. It's a really small touch, but I love that EA were building their own original little Bond universe with these games, bringing back a character like this, and I mean, even at the time in the film series, this was unheard of. At that point, Bond girls did not reappear in the films, much less reappear in a less significant role. Zoe was the main Bond girl of the previous game, and here she's definitely a secondary character. She's here for just 3 levels, but I love that her appearance adds a bit of spice to this cutscene in particular. Her walking in on Bond making out with another lady and the extended awkward pause in between the introductions is so funny to me.
Agent Nightshade, CIA.
Dominique Paradis, French intelligence.
Seriously though, I love Bond's awkward facial acting here, including a moment where he just looks dead into the camera and channels thoughts of, would suggesting a threesome make this more or less awkward? Zoe informs the pair that Mayhew has arrived with the stolen guidance device and Drake is to meet with him. She will cause a distraction while Bond secures photos of the meeting. Dominique heads away to maintain her cover.
Is that dress standard company issue, Nightshade?
Don't get any ideas, 007. It's armored in all the right places.
Why is she contorting her head like she's a cobra doing a mating dance? So, it's off to spy on Drake's meeting. Firearms now permissible, so head in, all guns a-blazing. There are a few guards to take out along the way in this quite linear segment before you find the clearly radioactive door that takes you through to the meeting spot. A cutscene plays where Bond rather inconspicuously gains some snaps of Mayhew, handing over the stolen guidance chip to Drake, and overhears mention made of NightFire elements. Before the conversation can continue though, Zoe is revealed to have been captured, and I just love how sassy she is here.
We caught her in the hallway, sir.
I was looking for the powder room.
His lockpicks and the 9mm?
Hey, it's a tough neighborhood.
I do find it interesting that Zoe has a different voice to what she had in Agent Under Fire.
I don't know how to thank you.
Hey, it's a tough neighborhood.
Now this could well just come down to maybe the previous actress just wasn't available, or maybe the developers just figured like, hey, who cares? I mean, it's not as if people are going to be so obsessed with these games that they're going to be making 2-hour-long videos online about them in 2 decades time, is it? But of the 2 portrayals of Zoe Nightshade, this is my favourite in NightFire. I like the huskier voice, and she has a bit of a more bolshy personality in this one. I do like that the game gives her an extra dimension of character. So with the area now on high alert, it's off to retrieve the chip from the safe room and escape with Nightshade. This is another part of the level where you're free to go about things in a handful of different ways. You can hop down into the meeting room and find the safe room that way, or you can go out the window and secure a Bond move by using this zip line and accessing the safe room from down below. I always find the flashbang grenades are really helpful here. These things let out a blast of light which paralyzes enemies for a short time, allowing you to take them out with a single punch. Getting the case with the guidance chip requires the use of the Q laser, first to get into the room and then to break the hinges off the safe. You collect the case as well as a Sentinel rocket launcher, which allows for a suitable escalation in the action for the finale.
More power!
Zoe has managed to escape capture and meets you at the cable car, which heads off only to be stopped and attacked by a definitely not the Rock Rook flying a massive military helicopter. This is where the guided rocket launcher comes in, and boy, is this just a blast of a way to end the level. The Sentinel is one of the most fun weapons in the game, and I love how destroyed the cable car can become depending on how many hits it takes. A few good shots with the rockets brings the level to a close as Bond and Zoe escape the cable car Moonraker style, except in this instance Bond is using his bare hands to slide down the cable wire, which seems ill-advised.
Nice landing, James. Why do you always seem to end up on top?
A lower center of gravity?
And that's the end of the exchange. Of course, though, there's every reason to replay the level to secure a platinum medal and all of the unlockables that come with it, so time to collect some tokens. The exchange has a bunch of gold 007s to collect, 8 in fact, but you only need 7 to get full marks, and going for broke and getting all 8 actually gives you nothing extra, which feels unfair, but I guess they make this allowance because depending on where you start in the second zone of the level, it'd be a real hassle to travel to the opposite ends to secure both tokens available in this particular area. In the first zone you have 2 tokens,
tokens. There's one by the very start of the level. You need to go back along the road that the truck came from to find it, and then the next one is in the ravine by a smashed box with some armor nearby. The second zone, as I say, features two. One is in the wine cellar, and the other is on the balcony in front of you if you've taken the long route into the castle. In the party section, there are two more. There's one in the library where you meet with Dominique and Zoe, and another in Drake's reception room. Terribly sad that pressing the action button near the piano does not trigger a little Bond theme flourish like it does in Agent Under Fire. And in the final zone, there are two more, one outside the window near the start point, and the other tucked away in this room around the back of the cable car station. This one takes a good bit of searching around for, but your troubles get you a Zoe Nightshade reward card, multiplayer skins for classic villains Baron Samedi and Oddjob, and an upgrade to your pistol. So from this point on, the PP7 is gold, and this is a really cool and very useful upgrade. Indeed, I think that can be said of most gold medal awards. They can really help you out on the single-player campaign, as well as just making things a bit more fun. Anyway, on to the next level, Alpine Escape. This is an on-rails shooting segment as Bond and Zoe escape from the ground surrounding Drake's castle, and it's an absolute blast. The first chunk of the level has you stationary, fending off guards while Zoe tries to get the snowmobile going. I love how explosive it is right from the off. It includes a couple of Bond moves that you get for being creative with how you dispatch of Drake's men. Once the snowmobile gets going, it really is an adrenaline rush of a level as Zoe erratically charges you through forests and icy terrain. There's another excellent Bond move that you can get here as you blow up this entire watchtower. Ammo and armor opportunities are quite limited, so you really need to keep on top of your enemies or your health can seriously start to deplete. The most efficient way to take out snowmobile guards is by targeting the drivers rather than the vehicles themselves. After a few hits, the drivers all go flying off, whereas it takes much more ammo to get the snowmobiles themselves to explode. There are a couple more Bond moves to aim for, and surprisingly for a level involving vehicles, none of them come from shooting out tires, but rather shooting this grating gets you one while preventing the castle gates from closing by shooting the controls, gets you the fifth desired Bond move. But you could just blast the thing to bits with rockets, which is, depending on the mood that I'm in on any given day, can feel much more cathartic. I also love how the level features this little bit where Bond and Zoe crash through some swanky hotel. For a fine-looking level, it does look a little janky here, and the animation on the slack-jawed bystanders isn't so great, but part of me wonders, actually, if this was a late addition to the game, but whatever, I'm happy it's here. It feels like a very Roger Moore James Bond moment, complete with quip.
Sorry, we forgot to make a reservation.
I love that if you listen closely, you can just hear someone in the crowd shout "idiot" there. That really should have become a recurring element of the series. Idiot. The level ends with a really cool cutscene where the snowmobile flies through an attacking helicopter. I always used to think that this helicopter henchman was a cameo from the Bond model from Agent Under Fire. It looks just like that character, especially with the stealth suit and everything. But on closer inspection, the face does indeed look to be different, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. If I do have any criticism about this level at all, it's that I wish that there was more of a sense of escalation or a definitive end to it. At a certain point, it can just start to feel a little repetitive. Don't get me wrong, it's still a quick and very fun level, but it's always nice when things can end with a mini-boss of sorts, so it's a bit of a shame that the helicopter showdown is shown in a cutscene rather than being a specific goal. Once you've achieved a gold medal, there are 3 007 tokens to come back for, all of which are triggered with certain actions, which is a cool way to get the tokens into an on-rails level. The first is near the start, where exploding these guards causes one to appear. The second is the result of a shoot-off with this one intrepid snow guard, and the third comes from killing 2 guards above the gate out of the grounds. That third one can be particularly tricky to acquire if you're also going for the Bond move, which involves stopping the gate from closing. There's an extra bit of tension from these in that they're so time sensitive. If you miss one, then you might need to start the level over again to have another chance at getting it, which makes the Platinum Medal feel all the more rewarding. This one gives you a Max Zorin skin, an upgraded grapple, and a whole multiplayer mode, Assassination, but we'll get on to exactly what that is later. And the card. Bond and Zoe's escape continues into the next level, which picks up with the pair in the morning, where they've presumably spent the night in some random cabin with Bond's Aston Martin Vanquish parked next door. Assuming that this whole escape route was indeed planned, it was kind of MI6 to locate a shag shack for Bond. They know him too well. But yes, another driving level, and this one is just so much fun. Like Paris Prelude, this is another time-sensitive level. You must reach the extraction point by a certain time, dispatching enemies and evading the police patrols along the way. The level is clearly the game's attempt at having some kind of visual tie-in with Die Another Day and Aston Martin Vanquish on ice, no less. But who cares? It's fast, frenetic, and a great conclusion to what I consider to be Act 1 of the game's story. Surprisingly, for a vehicle-based level, there are no Bond moves to be gained from shooting out tires on enemy vehicles. Does someone want to check EA Games and make sure they're alright? But rather, 2 Bond moves can be achieved by activating the Vanquish's Q-Smoke to lose tailing police vehicles, and another is gained from taking this rather epic shortcut through a town square. Going the regular way may not be so exciting, but you do get to use the Q-Wedge again. My only complaint here is that I want more of it. I love this level so much, I could happily play another 2 or 3 variations of it. It's an absolute blast. I love the final showdown on the frozen lake with the helicopters and the snowmobiles you need to destroy to provide Q-safe access to pick you up. It is just so much damn fun, zipping around on the ice, and I just love how beat up the Aston Martin can get.
Q's not gonna like this.
There are 5 007 tokens scattered throughout the level. 2 are at a couple of spots in the town. There's a slightly tricky one as you go over this ledge. It's one of those that if you miss it, there are no second chances. And then there are a couple more on the iced over river and final lake. Platinum medals get you multiplayer skins for Mayday and Scaramanga and an upgrade for your camera, which is pretty nifty, but you... And the card. But that's not all. Someone at EA must have really loved this level because it has a variety of button input cheat codes, which include a berserker mode where everything is blurry and moving way too fast and the machine gun ammo is just pure rockets. It's a crazy way to play and certainly makes it all the more challenging, but then there's even more beyond that. You can play through the level in a Phoenix Security branded SUV. This vehicle will appear in a level properly later on, and it's fun to see it included here, but by far the most substantial cheat code for my money is one that gives you a bonus race level behind the wheels of Dominique's Shelby Cobra. This is a cracking little Easter egg. It's basically you racing against some random goon vehicle. You have no gadgets to speak of, though I do find it fairly challenging, really. I wish that other driving levels in this game had similar features, but even just as a one-off, it's a really lovely addition. I adore that it all comes down to a photo finish, and if you win, it triggers a Bond move. It's so cool. Just before we wrap up and move on to the next level, I just want to point out that I absolutely adore the music score to this game, and I love the little flourishes of classic Bond themes and scores that play throughout, and I think it's especially prominent in this level where you can just hear bits of the On Her Majesty's Secret Service score weaved into the music. You can also hear stings from Live and Let Die in here too, which is really cool. It's a really fun mashup. It's really fitting and cool to hear these Bond themes repurposed in this way. I have no idea if the composers for this score were big Bond music fans before the game, or if they just really did their homework for this assignment, but either way, I absolutely love it. So Bond and Zoe are extracted by Q, and it's off into Act 2 of the game's story. With Double Cross, the level opens with a cutscene featuring a briefing from M, as well as making a moment to feature a certain classic Bond trope.
Mayhew will deliver evidence exposing Drake's master plan, codenamed NightFire, a scheme that Mayhew insists threatens global security.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
The bald guy you saw deliver a stolen guidance device to Drake in the exchange level has gotten in touch with MI6 because he believes that his boss is now going to kill him after blaming Bond and Zoe's interference in their plans in Austria on him. In exchange for safe extraction before Drake's men can get to him, Mayhew has offered to hand over data concerning Drake's NightFire operation. Bond is sent to Japan to meet with Mayhew at his home, where he is receiving what seems to be an incredibly pleasurable massage from Kiko, who it turns out is his personal bodyguard. Do ignore my erection. Obviously things kick off pretty quickly, and the first chunk of the game involves escorting Mayhew to his safety bunker, and it's quite an escalation in difficulty from the exchange, I'd say. I mean, the enemies come thick and fast and frequently armed with shotguns, which can take a heck of a chunk out of your health. Fortunately, Mayhew mainly waits behind you until you've cleared each room in turn and does not become a bald, middle-aged Natalia getting in your way at every conceivable opportunity. He even ducks to avoid firepower.
He's just an absolute model to be protected NPC. I hope you're taking notes. By the way, I just want to talk briefly about what I think is probably the most unusual gadget in the game, the Philips electric shaver flashbang. I mean, it's a useful gadget, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure why Bond brought his electric shaver along on a mission with him. I always thought that this was a bit odd until I was sifting through some of the literature that comes in the game box, and lo and behold, there's an advert for the thing, so I'll file this under hastily included product placement. I find it slightly hilarious given that this game is, I mean, let's face it, it's made for kids and teens, and the fact that they deemed this an appropriate tie-in, but then I guess we all have to get our first shavers from somewhere, and if you're going to be shaving off that bumfluff tween mustache, you might as well feel like James Bond while you do it, right? Getting to the bunker triggers a cutscene. Mayhew gives Bond a key to access the NightFire files in his bedroom safe.
Keep your head down. I'll be back for you.
Also, could you wipe the hard drive on my computer? I don't want to leave a data trail for Drake to follow. And please protect my servants. They're like family to me.
I love how annoyed Bond gets by Mayhew's constant requests here. It's just a nice little character detail. I do like that Bond is just so over this mission before it even gets started. Even at the opening cutscene, he's just like, yeah, just tell me where the NightFire data is, let's get on with this. He's clearly pissed off that he's suddenly having to play bodyguard to this villain who's only cooperating anyway to save his own skin. The next area of the level is kind of sprawling, and there are multiple ways to go about doing things right from the off. I mean, you can either just leave Mayhew's bunker by the main exit and shoot up the garden, or you can take this vent and take the stealthy route, which of course makes for more points come the end of the level. There are a couple of quite curious Bond moves in this too. The first occurs around here where you specifically achieve the move by sneaking under this garden bridge and shooting the goon from below. It just feels so weirdly specific when there are so many other opportunities for stealthy takedowns that feel much more deserving of merit, such as this one where you get a Bond move for sneaking into the bathhouse where one of Drake's staff is being held hostage, and saving the woman also triggers this little cutscene, which is thoroughly Bondian.
You saved my life. How will I repay you?
If I live through this, I'll need a large sake and one hell of a massage.
There's another curious Bond move later on in the level too, so you have to make your way through the garden and into one of Mayhew's buildings to destroy his computer. He says that he didn't want to leave a data trail for Drake to follow, but I think the old dude just visited some dodgy websites in his time, and now that he's in with MI6, he doesn't want any of it leaking.
I don't want to leave a data trail for Drake to follow.
Or for anyone to see my browser history. What? Anyway, it's easy enough just to walk into the house to do this, but the game rewards you for shooting out these lamps and using the power cable to shimmy your way into the building, which is, well, first of all, very dangerous. If the electrics get you, your health will deplete like crazy, but the action just feels a bit pointless because, as I say, it's much quicker and easier to just go around the corner and walk into the building that way. The only incentive for selecting this method, other than getting the Bond move itself, that I can tell you about is that you get to admire the 3D Brosnan model some more, and yes, it is glorious and handsome, just like the man himself, but if I want my daily fix of looking at Pierce Brosnan, I have many more, far easier ways to achieve this. Well, that's those 5 hours well spent. Now for my looking at George Lazenby fix. After saving another of Mayhew's staff, it's off into the next zone of the level, where you have to do more of that. I mean, what can I say? The man has a lot of employees, but at least you achieve plenty of 007 moves as you go. This is a fun environment to explore too, and surprisingly, it's quite sprawling. I mean, this is just the guy's house. Phoenix Corporation must be paying the big bucks if this is how Mayhew is living. I mean, his staff have rooms on site. As if goons with shotguns weren't enough, there are also a fair few snipers on this level, which can really catch you off guard if you don't know that they're coming. How they tend to operate is that as soon as the sniper sees you, they will fire a shot, and then there's always a slight delay before they fire their second, and it's kind of in that gap that you need to take a deep breath and make it count. Freeing all the hostages and retrieving the NightFire data gets you back to Mayhew in the bunker, and again, I just love how little time Bond has for the man in this.
We're finished here, Mayhew. Let's go.
What about Kiko? Have you seen her?
She's a big girl. I'm sure she can take care of herself.
Anyway, enough about that. Who wants to have nightmare fuel for the rest of their life? I don't often associate James Bond with horror, but I'll be damned if this ninja isn't the most terrifying thing to appear in a Bond game or even a Bond film, for that matter. I mean, those red eyes, the way it creeps around, the sword, this thing is horrifying, and I'll go out on a limb and say that this is probably the toughest boss fight in the game. The sword can take a huge chunk out of your health. He's using flashbang grenades, which can totally disorient you. There's hardly any cover other than the Aston Martin, and he just keeps trying to get close to you.
Mayhew. This is my personal space, buddy. Back off. As a kid, I used to really dread this bit coming up because this ninja is just so intimidating and scary, but now I like the challenge of it, and it's just a really fun, cool boss fight to end the level with. Sadly, though, Mayhew does not recover from his wounds and dies in Bond's arms, but not before revealing that the NightFire data that Bond is after is actually stored in his office computer at the Tokyo Phoenix building.
I thought the evidence was here, Mayhew. I did a little extra insurance policy to keep me alive. A lot of good it did me.
Given how pissed off Bond has been with Mayhew throughout this whole experience, I'm surprised he doesn't give him the indignity of a Mathis funeral. After being conspicuously absent for much of the level, Kiko reappears with an airtight alibi.
I was pinned down.
Yes, that will do.
But I guess Bond has had enough tomfoolery for the night as the pair head off to Tokyo. If you're going for platinum, there are 7 007 tokens to find in this level, 2 in the opening zone, 1 in the courtyard, and the second on this balcony in Mayhew's, Japanese memorabilia room. In the next zone, there are 3 more. 1 by the big gong in Mayhew's garden, 1 outside, and 1 tucked away in his dining room. This is the one that I always miss when I'm replaying the game. It's just so tucked away, I always forget that it's there. And finally, in the next zone, there are 2 more, 1 in the utility room and 1 upstairs on the balcony. Alright then, let's see what you get for your trouble. Multiplayer scenario uplink, nice. Upgrade to your sniper rifle, very useful. And your honor top multiplayer skin, that's great. And, oh my god. The Mayhew reward card? I know I've been taking the mickey out of these things all throughout this video, but I take that back now. I mean, just look at this thing. How can anyone not fall in love with his steel blue eyes, his Simon Cowell-style choice of shirt, and the raised eyebrow of a man secretly thrilled at his dodgy porn stash being destroyed by a British secret agent? The only downside to this is that I can't frame it and put it on my wall. Or can't I? Sadly, we cannot spend the rest of this video solely talking about the sheer pleasure that is the Mayhew reward card, because there are 7 more levels to go, starting with Night Shift, which sees Bond and Kiko heading to the Phoenix Tokyo office so that Bond can infiltrate and retrieve the NightFire files. The level opens with a cutscene, and it's very clear where Bond's head is at.
But they'll have the whole building locked down by now.
Anything can be penetrated with the proper tools.
And finally, the Q-worm.
Q? There's a lady present.
Though maybe it's no surprise he's as amorous as he is. I mean, who amongst us isn't after setting eyes on that Mayhew reward card? I love how utterly bored M is sounding at the start of this mission.
Bond, M here. Avoid civilian casualties at all cost. Q Branch has supplied you with tranquilizer darts. Please use them.
Sorry, love, am I keeping you up? Just while we're on the subject, I do like that a more subtle difference in the difficulty settings is that on operative difficulty, you will occasionally hear little comments and advice from M and Q like that, whereas on the harder difficulties, you don't hear anything, because they just know you're a pro at this. They can clock off early.
Bond, don't forget that your glasses can detect hidden laser tripwires.
Anyway, this is a stealth level, so your primary weapons include a tranquilizer dart gun and a keychain stunner. Lethal takedowns of the Phoenix security staff will fail the mission. Interestingly, I find that the best way to take care of the guards is actually just to punch them, rather than bother with the tranquilizer darts. If you do use darts to knock them out, they're just unconscious for a period of time before they get back up, seemingly unquestioning of why they suddenly passed out, but it's the night shift, I guess, so whatever. Whereas if you just knock them out with a single punch, they disappear and they don't come back. In my experience, even if you just charge right at them, you will generally be able to knock them out before they start running to the nearest alarm. They can still catch you off guard as they roam around the office floors, so it's good not to be too complacent. And, you know, I'm not, generally speaking, a huge fan of forced stealth levels, but I actually quite like this one. It's fun sneaking around the environment, planting the Q-worm in computers and using gadgets to get into the rooms. This may sound stupid, but as a kid, I got stuck on this level for ages because I had no idea that I needed to hold down the fire button to get the door decryptor to do its thing. So I just spent ages wandering around this top floor wondering what the hell I was doing wrong. This level also presents a good opportunity to use your Q-specs. The office floors have a variety of trip lasers, and if triggered, machine guns drop down and start firing at you. I mean, wouldn't you just love to have been working late in the office on the day when they were installing those? Well, it might have been an all-nighter, but it was worth it. Now time to go home and just open the door and walk down the corridor. The specs pick up lasers for you to avoid, as well as the footsteps of the guards, so that you know if they're nearby, which is cool, and I like this feature. It's just a shame that it's more effort than it's worth to use it. As I say, the guards are quite easily taken care of, even if they spot you, while the laser trip switches are really easy to disable. In the room that you have to go to activate the lift at the very start of the level, there's another computer next to it, and if you activate it, it switches off the lasers for a set amount of time. Plenty of time, I should say, for you to go about your objectives, so this whole feature is somewhat redundant. Indeed, the specs in general I find quite unhelpful, really. They're supposed to help you see enemies in the dark too, and even that, I think, even in the game's darker settings, light is never really a problem, and you need to be so close to a goon for their heat to be picked up. It all just ends up feeling kind of pointless. After a good deal of sleuthing, you get to the upper floors and onto the roof, where you are spotted by Dominique, who is zipping by in one of Drake's helicopters. Taking the exterior of the lift up to the top floor, a la Bond in Diamonds Are Forever, gets you into Mayhew's office, complete with its heat-seeking rocket launcher. Jeez, discipline in this office is something else. You plant the Q-worm in Mayhew's computer. Love the detail, by the way, that it's hidden a credit card with Universal Exports branding, taking, of course, the stock MI6 cover company name from the films. Lovely touch, and then you head into the security terminal to retrieve the desired NightFire files. Doing this triggers the alarm, and guards are suddenly upon you, but fortunately, Dominique is there to give you an escape route out.
You must get out of here, James. It's a trap.
I put that together when your boyfriend's chopper nearly clipped me off the building.
You don't understand. Drake couldn't open Mayhew's safe without the password, and he's not going to let the NightFire files live with you. These stairs go directly to the roof. You'll find a parachute in the helicopter. It's your only chance of escape.
Dominique, if Drake finds you out...
Do you think you're the only spy who can make someone trust you completely? Please, James, go now.
I've played this game so many times, I know this story like the back of my hand, but I do wonder if for a newcomer coming into this story for the first time, I do wonder if you're supposed to think that Dominique could possibly be a turncoat agent here. I mean, it's all a bit of a coincidence that the alarm goes off and then she's suddenly there to direct you up to the roof where there's guards waiting for you. I think you could be led to believe that this is perhaps maybe a trap set by her. Paired with the fact that Kiko is so obviously coded as a villain, I do wonder if this is an intentional bit of mislead, like it's so obvious that it must be the other way around, or indeed if it is just obvious and I'm thinking way too much about it. But hey, I've been playing this game for 20 years, I've played through it hundreds of times, what do you want from me? The rooftop firefight is a huge escalation in action after having to use non-lethal methods for so much of the level so far. There's a damn helicopter firing at you, taking out skills you a Bond move, and I should think so. This is crazy. It's a fun ending to the level, though, grabbing the parachute and jumping off the building before securing a ride from two random girls waiting at a light nearby.
Sorry to drop in like this, but would you ladies mind giving me a ride?
I think the more common reaction to this scenario would be to scream and hit the accelerator, but sure, laugh it up. There are only 3 opportunities for Bond moves in this level. One is the helicopter, the other 2 are this nifty little shortcut into the upstairs security room, and the other is given to you when you retrieve the NightFire files from the terminal, which is a little odd as this is just a necessary level requirement, but okay, whatever. And of course there are 7 007 tokens to seek out. There are 2 in the first zone of the level, one being in the garage and then the other in the office lobby. There are 3 more scattered around the office floor in various places, then 1 in the top floor boardroom, and finally 1 on the roof at the very end of the level. And for your troubles, you secure a Kiko reward card for invaluable presents throughout the level, presumably. A multiplayer skin for Christmas Jones, excellent. A new multiplayer scenario in Team King of the Hill, and another upgrade to your pistol. This means that the gold PP7 becomes the Wolfram P2K from this point on, a far more effective handgun, and a very welcome addition to the arsenal. Next up, it's Diana Ross's favourite NightFire level, Chain Reaction. In terms of the story, MI6 have decrypted
decrypted the NightFire files, and on the back of that obtained data, Bond is sent to investigate a shut-down nuclear power plant near Tokyo, where Phoenix Corp have been contracted to clean up the site, but MI6 suspects that Drake has been carrying out secret projects in some of the buildings. I would imagine most people remember this level as the one with all the snipers, because that's what it is really. It's two huge areas teeming with snipers, and some strategy is definitely required if you're gonna make it through this one. The very opening of each zone is pretty much the only time that guards aren't on absolute high alert for you, and even then, there are times when I've started the level and before I even move, they're already shooting at me.
007, your camera should help you here. Any snipers in the shadows will be much easier to locate.
The micro camera comes in handy here for sussing out where guards are positioned, and it's kind of up to you to figure out which way is the best way to pick them off. The snipers work much in the same way as they do in Double Cross. There's often a shot when they immediately see you, and then a pause before they fire again. It's tough, and damn if this wasn't the most frustrating level of the game for me when I was a kid, but there is something very satisfying about succeeding and getting in that perfect shot. It can be really tough when, you have to keep moving to survive. You can't stand still when all these snipers are targeting you, but you also have to try lining up your own shots, and that can be pretty difficult when you're having to do this on the go, though there is something very satisfying about the sound of the sniper rifle firing in this, as well as the sounds of it being reloaded. The areas are quite expansive and well worth exploring for extra kit that can help you out later. The target time for completing this level is 20 minutes, which gives you plenty of time to poke around, and there are lots of grapple points and zip lines to indicate places of interest. You can even find a Ronin device, which is this kind of automatic sentry disguised as a briefcase that can make your life a heck of a lot easier later on if you do pick it up here. Probably the toughest part of the level is the start of the second zone. There are so many snipers here, some of which respawn. Then there's these bastards that you can barely make out hiding behind the shards of broken glass in the windows, and oh my god, the horror when you're exposed at the top of this crane structure and the guards start popping out one by one. There's nothing worse than being halfway across this zip line and hearing the dreaded sound of a sniper firing at you and knowing that you are totally powerless against it until you reach either side. Just while we're on this shot, I know that this is going to sound really silly in this day and age, but back when I was a kid playing this game, I really thought that this was the most damn beautiful thing I'd ever seen in a video game. I have no doubt that NightFire was not the first game to feature a lens flare, but you get it at a couple of points in this level, and it really did just blow my mind when I was a kid. I thought it was so cool and pretty, and the music is so top-notch. I really felt like I was playing through an actual James Bond movie. It just felt so cinematic to me. There are a few hangar buildings that you need to infiltrate at points, and most of the objectives revolve around photographing some of Drake's prototypes, including what seems like a jetpack, and then there's a laser beam. The mounted laser is really fun, by the way. You need to use it to destroy the door to make your way out of the level, but it's also just fun to mow down goons with. This gets points from me too for sharing a nice blue laser color with the ones emitted from the Moonraker lasers. I like to think that it's some tech that Drake maybe stole from some agency that confiscated all of Drax's assets and then reverse engineered it for his own nefarious purposes, but maybe I'm just taking my own personal headcanon a bit too far. Heading out the exit completes the level, and in the wrap-up cutscene you see Bond escape the facility to find Kiko, who, what do you know, is a wrong'un and knocks Bond out. Would never have figured, she seemed so innocent all this time. In terms of Bond moves, the level only has 3, a couple that make absolute sense to me. There's one at the very start where you can use your laser watch to gain alternative entry into the first hangar, and later towards the end of the level you get one for activating this crane thing and grappling onto it, which is an awful lot of fun. The one that I feel is kind of a weird choice is this one that you get from hopping on this Phoenix robot box mover thing and grappling up to this small ledge where there's ammo waiting for you to collect. Fair enough, extra ammo is all well and good, but there are so many other secret stashes to find in this particular level that feel much more deserving of a Bond move than this, but okay, whatever. For 007 icons, there are 7 to collect. 4 in the first zone, 1 on top of a forklift in the first hangar, the next along a catwalk that you access via a zip line, 1 in this empty turbine thing, and then 1 on the floor of the TR2 warehouse. There are a further 3 to find in the next zone, and some of these are pretty tough, actually. These are really big environments to explore when you're looking for these really tiny things. There's one way up in that broken glass window room, then there's another one at the end of the rail of the crane that moves along, and finally, one that's a real pain in the arse to locate. There's this extra room in the big warehouse at the end of the level, and the thing is tucked behind a bunch of crates. It should be a Bond move in itself, just finding the damn thing. A platinum medal on this level gets you skins for Goldfinger and
one-way lin, an upgrade for your dart gun, and a Rook reward card, presumably because the henchman makes a reappearance in the level's cutscenes, the first time that he's appeared since the exchange. Presumably scheduling conflicts with the Mummy Returns prevented him from being in the game more, so I can't let this level go by without addressing a goof I made in my previous video review of this game. By the way, something that kind of weirds me out about this level, sometimes when you shoot a guard you hear the others say things like, man down, but other times you hear them say, stop it! Which I think is really upsetting. It's like they're really sad that their friends are being shot. Stop it! Cut to me receiving comments on a fairly regular basis for several years informing me that I did indeed mishear, and the guards are actually saying, I'm hit. But I'll be damned if I don't still hear stop it every time I play this game. I clearly just can't get over the fact that Drake, for all of his faults, really does foster a very emotionally involving private army of goons. Next up is the adrenaline rush that is Phoenix Fire, which appropriately opens with one hell of a cutscene.
I'd ask you to join us, Mr. Bond, but why waste caviar on a man who won't live long enough to enjoy it?
Give mine to Kiko. She's earned it.
Don't take it personally. Women have an advantage, you see. They can blind us with love, but that's why we have other eyes to watch them. Like the hidden camera in the stairwell leading to the helipad.
I don't understand, Raphael.
Please, don't insult me further. It's a pity. I fell quite hard for you. And now it's time you did the same for me. Goodbye, Dominique. Use the helipad, and take care of the body. No! It's futile, Mr. Bond. You've seen too much of my operation to live, but I wanted you to enjoy this moment first.
So this recurring nightmare where you're falling from a high building, you say you can trace it back to November 2002? The scream, the shot from her POV of falling to the ground, it's all pretty intense, especially for an ally character, though it is nice to see NightFire adopt the classic Bond film trope of the sacrificial lamb ally. This level is all action all the time. It's back in the Phoenix office environment from Night Shift, but you need to navigate yourself through the space in a different way to escape from the tower. It's a cool payoff from Night Shift when you can go to the computers that you installed the Q-worm on in that level to gain access codes to help you here. The overall objectives are quite simple. It's basically get out of the building, but there are still a variety of ways to go about things that make it super replayable. Along with the exchange, this is probably the level that I revisit the most often. It's just an adrenaline-fueled shootout filled with weapons and explosives. The standout section for me is the firefight on the stairwell, which I feel like we more or less got an adaptation of in No Time to Die. Was Kerry Fukunaga a NightFire fan by any chance? One of my favorite shortcuts is using a satchel charge to blast away the glass to the security room you need to get into to activate the lift, rather than go to the efforts of getting the codes from the computer. And I just love how many goons there are in this one. Sometimes you just enter a room and they're up to something, like these ones who set off their own satchel charge for some reason. Like, dudes, why are you blowing up the glass? There's a door right there. There's a whole section where you're just traveling down on top of a moving lift and having to fend off guards and using your watch laser to disable explosives. It's a really fun bit, but the sight of Bond in a lift shaft does make me feel like we're missing something.
James! Don't leave me! James! Help me! James! James!
We sure know. Okay, I take it back. We're not missing anything at all. The level ends with a shootout in the lobby of the office as Bond makes his way to the entrance, only to be saved by...
Need a lift, Mr. Bond? Allura McCall, Australian intelligence. On loan to MI6.
All right, I don't need your life story. Push that pedal, girl. I've always really liked the cutscene that ends this level, and particularly that they're bold enough to actually acknowledge Bond's emotions at the loss of Dominique.
Q branch has been monitoring the tower security systems through the worm you planted. I saw you in a bit of a spot, so here I am. Well, you're a talkative one, aren't you?
Sorry. It's been a difficult evening, Miss McCall. I lost a friend.
I think it's a bold choice because it's taking a moment for character, for an emotional moment. They could quite easily have just had Bond turn on the charm with this pretty blonde lady that just picked him up, but no, they have the maturity to say, well, actually he just lost a friend, a fellow agent, and he's probably not going to be in the mood for that right now. He will be again in 2 minutes though, I mean, let's not go nuts. In terms of Bond moves, there are only 2 in this level, but boy are they Bond moves. The first one you get by hopping out of the lift you start the level in, then you grapple up to the same shaft you used to access the floor in Night Shift, but now someone has just casually left a grenade launcher in the cupboard. Seriously, what is it like working in this office with these deadly sentry guns in the ceiling and explosives in every other room? The addition of the grenade launcher to your arsenal is hugely valuable and allows for some really fun moments taking out a whole team of goons in one go. The second Bond move of the level is pretty incredible, actually. It's if you head towards the glass-encased walkway between the 2 towers of the building, a helicopter is triggered, and taking it down provides you with a Bond move, but my god, this can be a challenging bit. It's firing rockets at you, and there's not much space to maneuver in. You definitely need to make sure that you pick up the Scorpion rocket launcher to have any hope in defeating the thing, and honestly, it's a good idea to get a Ronin on the go too for additional support, but it's a really rewarding Bond move to achieve, and possibly my favourite of the entire game. When it comes to 007 tokens, there are once again 7 to find, 1 on the ledge outside the lift at the very start of the level, and then 1 in the boardroom of that floor. 3 more are scattered around the office floor, 1 near the Skybridge walkway, 1 in the cafeteria, and 1 in an individual office space. 2 more are located in the lobby, 1 in the security room, and 1 on the floor of the lobby itself. On 00 difficulty, these can be kind of tough to collect, especially the last ones. The guards are just respawning at such a rate, and you're having to hightail it across the room. Please don't kill me, 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 please don't kill me. It's well worth the effort though, because as well as a new multiplayer scenario, demolition, and a skin for Drake in a suit, because what kid wouldn't want to play as that, you can also unlock the final upgrade to your pistol, which turns it into a gold P2K. The game describes it as the ultimate handgun, and indeed it is a brilliant weapon, but I must say that when it comes to handguns in this game, I have a real fondness for the Raptor Magnum. I think its most extensive usage in the game is on the Phoenix Fire level, and just the sound and power of the thing is terrific. I love blasting through the early stages of the level with this. And the card. Oh right, yes, you also get the Allura reward card, though Midriff reward card might have been a more apt title. How are her pants even able to stay up? They're that low. Next up is Deep Descent, start of what I would say is Act 3 of the game's story, with the action moving to the South Pacific as Bond and Allura head off to infiltrate Drake's private island, where he has his missile disassembly facility. M, though, is convinced that he's actually building space shuttles for the astronauts, whose prototype wear and weapons you photographed in Chain Reaction. In a cool modernizing of the Lotus Esprit from The Spy Who Loved Me, this level sees the Aston Martin Vanquish convert to submarine mode, and what follows is an underwater adventure, infiltrating Drake's facility and destroying his collection of nuclear missiles and submarines along the way. In theory, I like all of this, but Deep Descent is probably my least favourite level of the game. Now, if you're a long-time viewer of this channel, you may well be rolling your eyes right now, as I am known to complain about underwater sequences in both Bond games and Bond films, and indeed, you may well be wondering what my problem is with the wet stuff. God, I hate you. It's just that I feel like it can really slow down the action a lot of times, and this is no exception. I just find it hard to feel adrenalized when everything is moving at a third of the speed it should. That being said, though, I think the level looks really terrific. There are some moments that I think are really stand out. The whole chase sequence in the middle of the level is lovely. These environments are really cool. I love the detail of the sunken plane and how its wing breaks off for you to dodge, and just the silhouettes of these sharks. It's such a nice visual. I should probably point out that the driving and on-rails shooting levels of the game were developed by a different team to Eurocom. These were done by Savage Entertainment and a team at EA in Canada, and they do look and play terrific. Indeed, I always wondered when I was a kid why the loading screens for the driving levels looked slightly different to the FPS levels, but I guess it's because it was different teams working on them. It would be remiss of me as well not to mention the little Agent Under Fire Easter egg towards the start of the level. You'll notice some branding on the side of a sunken ship which mentions Malprave Industries, of course Malprave being the main villain of that previous Bond game.
Again, I just love that EA was creating these little continuity references for fans of these things. It's a really nice touch and shows a certain degree of attention going into the game that I really do appreciate. I've always found this level pretty tough, in all honesty, largely down to there being no checkpoints, and there are a few places where making a single wrong move can result in a complete failure, like if you bump into any of these underwater mines, they immediately cause a cave-in and it's game over. But this pales in comparison to the frustration generated by this boss submarine at the end of the level. The missiles on this thing wipe out most of your health. Even with like mostly full body armor, you can only withstand like one hit from it before the second takes you out completely, and then it's right back to the start of the level. This is where the underwater setting frustrates me the most, because it's hard to outmaneuver these things. You just kind of need to find a place to hide out and peek around to fire your own missiles at the thing. But once it's defeated, that's the end of the level, as Drake's fleet of submarines blows up behind you. You know, I really can't fault Drake's ambitions here. He has nukes, subs, spaceships, he's got all the bases covered. There are 3 Bond moves to acquire in this level, 2 of them very near the start, both involving the remote missiles. You get one for destroying a communications link, and another for blowing up a pesky enemy patrol by destroying the explosive tanks beneath it. The final Bond move is a bit trickier, at least it is for me. So after you chase this one patrol through the complex, it leads you to a bit of an ambush, I guess. You get the Bond move by targeting the tanks behind the 3 enemies to take them all out in one go, and that secures you the Bond move. But on a couple of my playthroughs, I noticed that sometimes I did this and I just didn't get the Bond move for some reason. I've honestly no idea why this little cutscene was triggered in one of my playthroughs, but not the other. Maybe it's just a glitch in this version of the game, but you know, whatever. Let me know your comments below if you have the answer for this, because it truly eludes me. As well as Bond moves, you have 6 007 tokens to collect. There's one in the sunken Malprave tanker at the start of the level, and then another not long after that on the floor next to the communications node. There's another on the seafloor beneath a load of mines, and another in a really fiddly place during the chase sequence. This is time sensitive, and if you blow it, there's really no space for reversing and trying again. And then there's another one hidden above the enemy subs that ambush you, and finally one in the rocks above the door that leads into the final area with all of the nuclear subs. This one can be quite disorienting to find. I do think the level, for the most part though, does a really good job at making sure you have your bearings, even though some of the spaces are just mass expanses of blue. The level design is so well done that if you think that's the route you should be taking, it probably is. I love the cutscene that ends the level. The Vanquish comes out of the water, and Bond and Allura just casually get out, hide it back in the water, and then they're just suddenly sprinting away like, oh right, yeah, we do have to save the world, we better get a move on. Rewards include skins for Electra King and Knick-Knack, as well as an upgrade for your decryptor. This essentially shortens the time it takes to decode locked doors, so it makes Night Shift and Phoenix Fire a little easier on replays, I suppose. And the card. Wait a minute, this Vanquish sub-reward card is almost identical to the previous Vanquish reward card. I'm starting to feel shortchanged here. The vehicle fun doesn't stop there, oh no, because the next level, Island Infiltration, sees Bond and McCall racing into an SUV and continuing on deeper and deeper into Drake's island base. First objective is to download the base's access codes, which will allow you to open gates and make your way further into the island. One of my favorite Bond moves of the game here. You can just totally charge into this compound to download the code, and there are enemies there to destroy you, but instead, if you just wait for the gate to open automatically, they think that you're one of them, and you can just go about your business. But I love that it's still kind of tense. Like, there's a guy up there with a rocket launcher, and you know he is just waiting for any opportunity to fire off a shot. Sadly, the automatic gate seems to only be a one-way device, and Drake's men really care about their infrastructure because damaging the gate leads to all hell breaking loose. The main objective of this level is to disable Drake's island defenses, specifically the Sentinel Towers. All well and good, but I have to say that I find destroying these things more fiddly than anything else. They fire so rapidly and intensely that I find myself usually just trying to find a spot where my missiles can target them, like from around a corner, but they can't hit me, which is a little awkward and kind of slows down the pace of the whole thing for me. The SUV is fun to drive though. It handles very differently to the Vanquish, which is nice, and there's a cool hidden route that you can take just before you reach the end of this particular driving segment. You can either go the regular route and follow the road around, use your code to extend the bridge, or you can destroy some local indigenous architecture and access this secret tunnel, which also gives you a Bond move. The final part of this driving section is
is another bit that I've always found a little bit more annoying than anything else. It's kind of like a mini boss battle with this Sentinel, but again, the thing is so powerful that it just depletes your health like crazy. There's basically no cover, and you just have to be in the right spot for your missiles to target it and blast away. I tend to usually hang back a bit to destroy the cars before triggering the cutscene that brings up the Sentinel, and then it's just a case of mashing the fire button until it's destroyed. So you would think that that'd be the end of this particular level, but no, that's not even the half of it. Bond and McCall decide to hop into a nearby ultralight and complete the rest of their objectives from the air. I've always just found it slightly odd that these aren't two separate levels, and indeed, I really do wish they were. There are times when I would just rather play one side of it without having to do the whole thing. And it'd be nice to not have to carry over your depleted health from the driving section into the next bit, particularly with how awkward those Sentinels are to destroy. Anyway, all is forgiven quite soon, as this is one heck of an epic on-rails segment. McCall is flying the jet while you use your rockets and the pulse weapon to take down more Sentinels, enemy patrol towers, warships, and entire access routes. This is an explosive as hell level and an awful lot of fun for it. You do need to be mindful of ammunition though, considering that there's no place to pick up any more, and those rockets are very necessary for taking out the Sentinel towers without taking a real drumming. Taking out the bridges is an awful lot of fun too. You get a Bond move for this particular one, and I just love the dogfight bits where you're shooting down other planes. Destroying the last of the Sentinel though is surprisingly not the end of the level. Bond and McCall are shot down, and then the very final part of the level sees you control this giant turret with its pulse guns and cannon. It's another fairly explosive section, which includes 4 Bond moves, one for destroying this tank by blowing up the gas canister next to it, and then there's a further 3 more for destroying the various waves of ultralight jets which glide by at various points. The level ends when you destroy this submarine, the weak spot being this little grey box that pops up. I feel like that's a bit of a fatal design flaw in the sub, to be completely honest, but whatever. McCall sets charges to blow up the turret, and the level comes to a very abrupt end with the pair running off. To achieve a platinum medal, there are 4 007 icons to be found. The first at the very start of the level, behind where you start. You can reverse back up to the beach and grab it. The next one is on the helipad in the compound where you download the security codes. The third is to the side of the mini-boss Sentinel weapon, and the fourth and final one appears in the ultralight section of the level. It appears when you destroy this first enemy tower. For your troubles, you are rewarded with the Protection multiplayer scenario, a multiplayer skin for Bond in his tuxedo, which is fairly awesome, and then there's an upgrade to your stunner gadget, which is fine. I mean, it increases the range and charge of the thing, but especially in the later levels, this is hardly a gadget that I use all that much, unless I'm in need of a bit of a laugh anyway. Seriously, what the hell is this dance supposed to be? And the card. Okay, wait, hold up. I know that I've made light of these things throughout this review, but this is one that I actually quite like because it's nice to have a better view of the ultralight jet, as it's quite a cool vehicle. It does make me think of Transformers, though. I don't know, the colours, the insignia, it's all very Decepticon, don't you think? Next up is possibly the toughest level of the game, Countdown, as Bond and Drake go head-to-head on British daytime TV to try and win the coveted teapot and encyclopedia set, with it all coming down to the crucial Countdown conundrum. Is it NightFire? It's Infighter? Let's take a look. But no, rather Bond and Allura happen upon an entrance into Drake's underground base. Bond heads in through a vent, while Allura stays behind to contact MI6, really putting in the hard graft on this mission, isn't she? The level begins and Bond is armed with a pretty deadly crossbow, and your first objective is to follow the moves of Kiko, who has somehow gotten wind that Bond is indeed in the base.
Bond may have penetrated our security.
Bet that's not the only thing he's penetrated today. What? It's a very large level, comprised of a lot of corridors. It's a very linear thing, just going through the various spaces. Allura's on call, though, to give you instructions as to which corridor to be in and so on. However, there are plenty of ways to go about doing things to vary up your gameplay. There are vents and alternative pathways in a few places, and these are certainly recommended on the harder difficulties. Goons are pretty brutal at this point in the game, and you'll have plenty of gunfighting coming up, so really best to conserve your energy for the time being on this one and opt for the stealthier routes. There are also lots of opportunities to use your gadget arsenal as well. There are multiple boxes that you can use your laser on to cut security cameras and so on. The good old decryptor can be put to use to access a whole arsenal of weapons in one spot, and I do love the variety of explosives that you get in this level. There are trip mines, remote mines, a grenade launcher, all pretty great stuff. Eventually you follow Kiko to the security room, which you can promptly explode, but this unleashes the full force of of Drake's army, and from here on the level is a fairly explosive firefight. There's even a mini-boss of sorts here with Rook, who it seems is permanently scarred from the events of the exchange. He can be tough to defeat on the harder difficulties, but if you have enough grenades stored up, a few direct hits from those will take him down, and then you can pick up his samurai laser, a very cool weapon which doesn't require ammo, but it can overheat. I do love the overcharge feature too, where you can just blast enemies with one concentrated explosion. The next zone of the game sees you fighting through guards in missile silos. Again, it's kind of an expansive maze of corridors, but it's linear enough that I think it's easy to stay well oriented, and there are a bunch of trip bombs to watch out for, but overall this is a fairly straight down the line firefight section of the level, leading up to Bond entering the Omega sector. I didn't realize that Drake's villainous activities extended as far as fancy wristwear. But speaking of Drake, the Omega section of the level opens up with him villainously monologuing over the tannoy, where we get a glimpse into his nefarious motivations.
My loyal associates, before we cross into the void of space, it's time to unveil the final stages of Operation NightFire. The utter transformation of the planet you'll soon view from your shuttle windows. The communists, socialists, and fascists were predestined to fail in their efforts at globalization. The answer is sublimely simple: a corporate takeover by Phoenix International on a worldwide scale. No more national boundaries, but continent-wide regions of agriculture, industry, energy production, and research. Quarreling governments are replaced with a single board of directors. Of course, our new order will be resisted, but we have the ultimate leverage. The nuclear missiles mounted in our island grottos and controlled from an unassailable command center, the U.S. Space Defense Platform. Unfortunately, our security has been temporarily breached. Therefore, I've advanced our launch schedule. All flight crews and combat units are to board their shuttles at once and prepare for liftoff. Operation NightFire has begun.
So he wants to turn the world into one giant corporation? Isn't that basically what we have now? I kind of like that Drake is this, like, uber-demented capitalist, and you know what, this is a Bond video game. I don't need, super in-depth motivations for anything. But just a sidebar about Drake more generally for a moment. As much as I love this game, I do find him bit of a disappointing main villain. Like I've said before, this is a game. I don't need any kind of serious character depth or motivation or anything like that, but even just his physical presence and voice throughout the game is kind of bland. Like, I get a lot more character from Kiko, Rook, and god, even Mayhew. Drake just seems dull by comparison. I wish that he were just a bit more interesting, especially when it comes to his physicality. He just looks like he has the face of any standard goon. But whatever, this is another really fun section of the game, and this is such a cool environment that will actually reappear as a multiplayer map, and you have such a varied arsenal at this point that it can just be an awful lot of fun to dispatch of goons in a variety of different and creative ways. Everything leads to a terrific climax that gives me major Moonraker vibes, and I love it for it. So Kiko triggers a walkway to collapse, dropping Bond into the launching pads beneath 3 shuttles. The ships take off one by one, which means that you need to rush into these rooms at the side, which must be hecka reinforced to withstand these blasts, and in between launches there are goons and more ninjas to take care of, all while Kiko looks on from a bulletproof lift. This is such a brilliant climax to the level. After the shootout with Rook earlier on, it would have felt repetitive to do the same thing with Kiko here, so I love how she's getting her goons to do her dirty work, and this environment is just so huge and cool. I wish that this were a multiplayer map in itself. These huge ships, I think it's brilliant. With only one ship remaining, Kiko heads off to board before Bond pulls the same trick on her in another brilliant cutscene that includes the death of a female character in the game, but given what Kiko did to Dominique earlier on, I'd say that she rather deserves it.
James? I'm losing your signal. Are you alright?
I suppose I'm rising to the occasion.
just adore the look on Bond's face as he drops her down. It's stone cold. The eyebrow is just perfect. Love this moment, and Kiko gets the best villain death of the game. And with that, Bond suits up and heads into outer space, and as a big Moonraker fan, this is obviously music to my ears. In Countdown, you only need to achieve one Bond move to get full marks in the scores at the end. You achieve this by destroying all of the green circuit boards with your laser to disable the base's security in the first zone of the level. Curiously, my Prima official guide to NightFire says that there is in fact another Bond move achievable in this level, specifically by taking out guards by shooting the explosive barrels when they're stood next to them. The first time you do this, it says you'll get a Bond move, but I'll be damned if I didn't try this over and over to no avail. I couldn't find any video evidence of this online, of anyone getting it, and I looked through a bunch of walkthroughs, which were all kind of mixed actually as to whether or not they even mentioned it or not. I guess that some of them probably just copy the information from guides like the Prima guide without ever actually playing the game themselves, or maybe this is just a glitch that affects the GameCube version of the game. If you've ever achieved the move, please do let me know. I'd love to know if it's actually a thing. There are still 7 007 bonus tokens to pick up throughout the level though, and the Prima guide actually gets this wrong too. It only lists 6. Dear God, I'm kind of nostalgic for gaming misinformation like this. I mean, nowadays, I think there's so much less of it because you have 100 walkthroughs of any game you want online, more than 100 walkthroughs, but back in the day, sometimes you only had like 1 or 2 things to rely on, and if they were wrong, you know, I would spend ages trying to achieve a certain thing that it turns out I couldn't, but hey, it was printed in an actual proper thing that I bought in a shop, so it couldn't possibly be wrong, could it? Anyway, there's one in the air ducts near the starting point, another in the crawl space below a bunch of crates in one of the warehouse rooms. There's another couple in spots as you make your way through the missile silos, then there's one in a side room next to the big room with the pool in it, and the final 2 are underneath a couple of the shuttles in the final bit of the level. And if you achieve the coveted platinum medal, you get a Pussy Galore skin, excellent, an upgrade to your watch laser, which is so-so, and you also unlock explosive scenery for multiplayer. There's also the reward card, of course, which is this textbook case of nightmare fuel. Must it be so close in on his face? And so we reach the final level of the game, Equinox, which puts Pierce Brosnan's Bond in outer space. As a big Moonraker fan, I'm just thrilled to be here, almost as thrilled as I am to hear a Thunderball flourish in the score music.
James, I'm still patched into Drake's comm system.
Allura appears over comms to tell you that Drake and his men have overtaken a space-based missile defense platform, and indeed his plan all along was to hijack the station and use its missiles for his own dastardly schemes.
I'll credit you with persistence, Mr. Bond. Persistence and failure. There are NATO launch sites on Earth which could challenge the arsenal on my island. Those bases will be incinerated by turning these defensive missiles into massively offensive ones.
Offensive? What are they gonna do?
Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
I can't help but feel that there's a glitch in the audio mixing during this cutscene. Firstly, there's some external Darth Vader type breathing over the conversation, and second of all, it becomes almost impossible to hear what Drake is saying.
You're on a fool's errand, Mr. Bond. I've just locked the launch sequence. Nothing can stop Operation NightFire, not even my own death. That's a theory I mean to test. You've already failed miserably. But tinker with my missiles if you must. It would make a splendid target for my laser cannons.
No, Drake, sorry, I can't hear you. You're gonna have to speak up. It's the missiles. They're really loud. So this level takes place in outer space, which is just so awesome and a brilliant way to climax the game. The first objective is to destroy the missile launch couplings. There are 8 missiles which are set to launch at various times, some simultaneously, and when that happens, these green light pad things appear. A few blasts from the samurai laser turns it red and sets them off course. While this is going on, Drake's goons are sent out in waves to kill you, and he also has this giant laser cannon which fires up and targets you at a few points. This level is a real balancing act and entirely time sensitive. You really don't have all that long to disable the missiles before they launch, but you also need to keep on top of Drake's goons so that they don't start to completely overwhelm you. You also have to be mindful of not overusing the laser because after so many successive shots, it needs to recharge, and it's the most frustrating thing when you're all lined up to shoot the missile guidance disc thingy and you just need to wait a few precious seconds for the weapon to finally recharge. Just to sidebar for a moment here, I do feel like story-wise we miss a pretty big chunk of something by basically
basically having the opening of the level go from Bond pulling up in the space station to Bond out in space in front of Drake. Like, it really feels like we should have had Bond going through the space station first to get to this point. And I know that in the PC Mac version of NightFire, such a level is indeed included. And yeah, sure, it just feels like there's something missing from this console version from just a story perspective. Like, how did these guys end up here? It's a real, like, you know, scene missing moment, but hey, it's the end of the game. If you weren't enjoying yourself up to this point, you wouldn't be here, and they've got your money, so whatever. It's just a little bit annoying because I feel like this game's story is otherwise, like, quite nicely polished and really well-rounded for a Bond video game, and it's just like, this moment always just slightly jars with me, going from that cutscene of Bond arriving to suddenly outside having a chat with Drake. Once the missiles are taken care of, they start destroying the base and the surrounding objects, including this space shuttle. In this particularly epic moment, the head of it flies off into the space station, which unleashes Drake from his control room, where he was previously just chilling in zero gravity, watching you work up a sweat. He has a targeting rocket launcher at his disposal, and it's up to you to take him down. He's the final boss of the game. So long as you keep moving and evading the missiles, you should be okay, providing you're able to get in a few headshots and explode a few of his own missiles right next to him. It can be a bit of a challenge when you're still getting used to the zero gravity controls, but eventually you are able to make short work of the villain who goes flying off into space, a la Drax, another nice Moonraker nod. Equinox is a really fun, challenging final level, and I must say it looks absolutely beautiful. Just floating around in zero gravity is an absolute blast, and yeah, okay, it's definitely on the fiction side of science rather than fact. Sorry, Cubby, but especially when it comes to video game Bond, I'm all for them pushing the envelope regarding these things. I mean, to an extent, we'll get to everything or nothing someday, but as far as NightFire is concerned, I just love this whole final level. Surprisingly, there are no Bond moves at all to collect during the level, but there are 7 007 tokens. Now, this entire level is set around one space station platform. Despite the illusion of space, is not actually that big a map, so how hard can it possibly be to acquire all those necessary tokens? Well, pretty damn hard, apparently. The time-sensitive element of the level, keeping up with the firing missiles and goons, is hard enough, but factoring in the time to pick up these tokens is a whole other complication, and you don't want to leave them all for the very end when Drake is firing his missiles at you, but some can be really quite tricky to get, like this one, seemingly floating, isolated in space, but actually right in the path of Drake's laser cannon. Still, collecting all 7 and achieving a platinum medal, which is actually harder than getting gold, I should point out. The 007 tokens give you a heck of a lot of extra points, but just getting gold means that you have to be extra conscious of your health and accuracy, things which you can make some allowances on when it comes to collecting the tokens for platinum. Anyway, for platinum, you get a multiplayer scenario in GoldenEye Strike, an upgrade to your sniper rifle, a skin of Bond in his spacesuit, which is just awesome, and of course, the James Bond reward card, but the joke's on them. I've had an image of James Bond with me this whole time. But yes, with that, the game is complete. Bond re-enters the atmosphere and presumably enters Allura. She pours him a martini, and they recline their seats and head into the ocean to presumably traumatize some sea life.
Shaken, not stirred. Or is it stirred, not shaken? Definitely stirred.
Astronomers from around the globe are reporting unexpected meteor showers. Well done, 007.
Then I'm sure the world won't mind my taking a few days off. We'll let the autopilot be our designated driver.
Oh, James.
Once you complete the game, this short making-of featurette plays. It has some behind-the-scenes footage, and it's a cool little bonus. Honestly, I'd just love a whole feature-length documentary on the James Bond EA games. I mean, there's such an undocumented aspect of the franchise that I would be fascinated to hear more about their development and making and so on. And this featurette is so brief that it can't really scratch the surface, but it's a nice little Easter egg all the same. Next up are the credits, which last for 10 minutes, but I've always loved this image that the credits play over. It's a really nice character grouping, and just like the movies,
anyways, the credits here end by claiming that James Bond will return. Whew, so that's NightFire's single player, but hey, we've got a whole multiplayer section to talk about still. It's an easy and perhaps quite valid criticism to make that NightFire's single player campaign is a little on the short side. You could probably blast through most of it in less time than I've spent talking about it here, but while I've replayed the story literally hundreds of times over the course of my life, it is but a drop in the ocean compared with how many hours I have spent in its multiplayer mode. Perfectly good use of anyone's time. I mean, what else would I have done with all those hours? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering here today for this important announcement. I give you the cure for cancer. With more modes, maps, weapons, and playable skins than you can shake a stick at, it has been more than 20 years of me playing this thing, and I am still not bored of it. But what exactly are we working with here? Well, a handy feature right off the bat. If you can't be bothered with faffing with a load of options, you can just select Quick Game, and before you know it, you'll be battling Drake, Kiko, and Rook in a random arena. Cool for those of us who might be somewhat indecisive and short on time. I just can't decide. Do I do Explosives 1 or Explosives 2? But for when you do have all the time in the world, there are a bunch of different game modes to choose from, including Arena. This is your basic free-for-all shoot-'em-up mode. Kill as many opponents as possible while avoiding enemy firepower to win. Team Arena, as above, but in teams. You can either be a good guy character on the MI6 team or a bad guy character on the Phoenix side. Capture the flag. In this mode, you're on opposing teams and you need to sneak into your enemy's base and capture their flag and then return it to your own base to secure points. And if flag bearing holds an intimidating level of responsibility for you, you can also act as a protector to your flag bearer teammates or protect your own flag from enemy capture. And that's not all. Uplink! There are 3 satellite dishes scattered around the levels, and walking into one will change it to your team's colour. The longer it's yours, the more points you will accumulate to win the game. Top Agent, like a standard free-for-all, but this time you have a set number of lives. Demolition! MI6 are tasked with destroying a satellite belonging to the Phoenix team. The only way to destroy these things to gain points is by blowing it up with a satchel charge. Helpfully, these are provided to all MI6 team players as standard. Points are required for blowing up the satellites, and Phoenix gain points for protecting. And that's still not all. Protection. This is the same as Demolition, except with the sides reversed, so Phoenix are the ones doing the destroying now. Industrial Espionage. Kind of like a Capture the Flag, except each team has a computer in their base, and there's one CD lying somewhere around the level, and you get points by finding the CDs first and returning them to your base. GoldenEye Strike. Oh boy, I love this one. So scattered around levels are the GoldenEye Key and GoldenEye Crystal, and after you collect both, a laser activates and kills an opponent. I guess the graphic is probably more suited to being the laser from Diamonds Are Forever, but whatever, we won't quibble. And that's still not all. Assassination. One player is the assassin, as designated by this symbol, and another is the target. If the assassin kills the target, they secure points. Everyone else in the game needs to kill the assassin to become the assassin themselves. King of the Hill. A blue circle appears on the ground in the level, and points are achieved by staying inside that circle. Whoever is able to do this for the longest wins. Team King of the Hill. Same as above, except now you have friends to join you in your circle. That's all. There are 8 maps to choose from, and while that may not sound like an awful lot, each of these really are worth their weight in gold. Well, except Missile Silo. I've never liked Missile Silo. Probably the most legendary of the bunch is Skyrail, a surprising sequel to a very similar map from the N64 version of The World Is Not Enough, but an absolute classic. It's a huge snowy landscape featuring an old castle-looking structure at the top of a hill and a more modern ski lodge-type building at the bottom. The 2 buildings are connected by a cable car system, which you can hop in to gain easy transport from one end of the level to the other. There are also 2 narrow pathways through cliffs at either side of the main battlefield. This is one of the most versatile and interesting multiplayer maps I've played in any game, quite frankly. It's such a well-designed environment that supports almost any kind of play and mode. The insides of the buildings are perfect for close-range shooting, while the outside provides some super satisfying setups for sniper battles. The place is so expansive that using Sentinel rockets in this space is an absolute blast, and it's also the best environment for using mini-vehicles, which are a nifty little feature included in the game. Turning these on prompts a few small helicopters and tanks to appear. Each include machine guns and explosives, and it can be a really fun way to annoy your fellow players, but by using them it does leave your character paralyzed and exposed, so it is a bit of a trade-off if you do want to use them. While Skyrail is a completely original creation for NightFire, Fort Knox is obviously based on the version of the Gold Depository from Goldfinger, and this is another favourite level of mine. It's all inside, but it's just a gigantic space spread over multiple floors, there are smaller rooms and offices to the side, and appropriately, it's adorned with gold. Such an awesome level. Next up is Snowblind. This is an environment tweaked from Drake's Castle in the Exchange level, featuring multiple wine cellars and passageways and a couple of rooms to hide out in. It's another very versatile space, though much more penned in than Skyrail and Fort Knox. Next is Phoenix Base, which is also taken from the single-player campaign, this one from Countdown. Not much to say about this level, it's quite small, and if you're the kind of person who just wants to watch the world burn, then I recommend playing this with lots of bots and the explosive 1 weapon set. It's just pure carnage. Just as an aside, something about this level kind of reminds me of Carver's stealth ship from Tomorrow Never Dies. Something about the control room, the water in the middle with the thing hanging over. I've no idea if that was indeed the inspiration for this level, but equally, had they just called this Carver's stealth ship and replaced the platform in the middle with a CVAC drill, I wouldn't have questioned it. Up next is another absolute classic for me, Atlantis. Yes, Stromberg's base from The Spy Who Loved Me is partially recreated here to really good effect. The attention to detail based on what we see in the film is really quite impressive. Obviously, there are some limitations with the level of detail in places. I'd just have loved it if this room could have displayed some sea life in the windows, just like in the film, but I love the film so much that it's always a blast to be able to actually explore the space like this. Now we come to Missile Silo, and okay, maybe my dislike is a bit exaggerated, but this is always my last choice of the game's maps. It's an original space set over several floors with some gaps in the center where a gigantic missile stands. I guess I just find it very uninventive. There's not all that much to it, and certain weapon sets just feel kind of wasted on it, though I do kind of like the greeny blue tint it has, possibly a nod to the fact that the environment is highly radiated, or an homage to David Fincher's visual style, definitely one or the other. But hey, can't be too down about it, because we have another Spy Who Loved Me inspired level to get to, Subpen. Okay, I say Spy Who Loved Me inspired, I might just be making an assumption here, but I totally get vibes of the Liparis tanker from that film here. It's 2 huge rooms containing submarines, and you can get into the subs and then on top of them, which is really cool. There are some Soviet banners hanging through the environment, so maybe it is indeed just intended to be some old Soviet sub pen, but whatever, it's a brilliant level all the same. And finally, we come to Ravine, another map to come from the Exchange level, as well as being another to feature a working cable car transit. Woohoo! This is a really awesome map. Snipers and sentinels in this level are an awful lot of fun, but a fairly significant downside is that the level does not support bots. I can only assume this is something to do with the giant walkway in the middle of the level, and maybe the bot's AI didn't extend to them not throwing themselves off the cliffs, but I don't know, there are other levels with drops, and I don't see bots dropping from the sky in those levels, so maybe it's something else. It's a shame, because as I say, it's a really awesome map, but withholding bots limits the kind of games that you can have in this space. In all honesty, I'm surprised that more maps pinched from single-player levels weren't included, and yeah, I get it, they only have so much space to play with and so much development time, and Calvin, why can't you just be happy with perfection instead of nitpicking absolutely everything? But there are just a few environments from the single-player mode that would have worked perfectly for multiplayer. The Phoenix office and Mayhew's house spring to mind, but whatever, for what we get, I couldn't be more happy. Except for Missile Silo. I have such an irrational dislike of that level, I really should see someone about it. So this recurring nightmare where you're dying as a result of nuclear fallout, you think you can trace it back to November 2002? Or are you just living in the 2020s? The character roster is really impressive, especially if you've done your due diligence and achieved all of those platinum medals, or just used a cheat code, there's that too. But it's a really cool collection of skins from the single player, as well as a whole assortment of classic Bond characters. I'm assuming that they didn't have the likeness rights to a bunch of actors, so the designers had to do their best approximations. Some turned out great, like Xenia, Electra, Knick-Knack, Jaws, but others look pretty terrible, and someone must have had a real grudge against A View to a Kill, because Mayday and Max Zorin? Really? NightFire includes that annoying feature by where good guy characters can't fight each other, which is so annoying. For example, if you decide to be Allura on a free-for-all match, no other player or bot can be Bond or Dominique or Waylon or any other good guy character, which is such an annoying feature that's present throughout so many Bond games. I'm assuming that it's an Eon thing rather than an EA thing, but it just seems so pointless. Like, you wipe out a good chunk of the available characters by doing this. I don't know what they think would happen if players were able to have Pussy Galore and Christmas Jones battling it out, but whatever. It's quite cool that multiplayer bots have some customizable stats to make them harder or easier, depending on how you want to play. These are not editable on classic characters, though, but that's all well and good, because I think they're pretty well assigned based on what we know of them. Like, Goldfinger has a greedy personality, yeah, that checks out. Scaramanga, an assassin, I think that's a job rather than a personality, but sure, and Xenia has no personality? Really? That strikes me as a bit harsh, but then I suppose it's pretty difficult to define exactly what personality type this is. She's an enthusiast? The variety of weapons is huge, and the individual weapon sets are really well balanced. I tend to use the random setting more often than any other, though. I just love the chaos it can generate by starting everyone with a golden gun. The game gets points, by the way, for including a Scaramanga accurate design for that weapon, and I also love how Oddjob's hat is available as a special weapon if you select to play as the henchman. The only thing somewhat lacking for me in the weapons is a larger selection of automatic machine guns. Most of them fire in bursts, and there's only really the SG-5 that you can really channel your inner Xenia and go ballistic with. A very minor quibble, though, because, as I say, I think that the level of variety available is otherwise really great. Last couple of multiplayer options that I want to talk about: fixed gun emplacements. These are really cool. If you switch them on, they'll place a couple of fixed weapons at a couple of points in the level, and these can include rocket launchers, which are definitely the best and can really come in useful if you're in a tight spot or low on ammo. Then finally, there is the option for explosive scenery, which, when I first played this game and saw that option, I thought that it meant that I could literally reduce the buildings to rubble, that they'd explode and fall down with enough of a battering. And sure enough, even though I was firing rockets into the ski lodge exterior for about an hour, that was not the case. Rather, selecting this option places these explosive barrels throughout the levels, and if you shoot them enough times, they explode. I guess I like this in theory. It's just a shame that once they're blown up, that's it for the rest of the game. They don't reform or anything. Still, it can be an extra way to take out a bot or two. All in all, NightFire is probably my favourite James Bond multiplayer experience of all time. It's highly customizable, features some incredible maps, and is just an absolute blast to play. I can appreciate how some people might find it a little slow, particularly in this day and age, and yeah, I mean, even compared with the previous Agent Under Fire, NightFire's multiplayer is far from being frenetic all the time, but I kind of don't mind. Maybe it's because there are just so many options to choose from and different ways to play, but whatever it is, I just never get tired of it. I'm playing this thing 20 plus years on, and I'm still loving it. As I wrap up my review, I think it's important that I frame my final thoughts with a bit of a reality check. NightFire is not a game with a lasting cultural impact. Those are the facts of the matter. It is not GoldenEye, and I don't think we'll ever see another Bond game reach those same dizzying heights again. But for those of us in the cult of Bond, NightFire receives almost universal love and adoration. And as a proud member of that cult myself, it does always warm my heart when I see people posting about the game and talking about the game. It warms my heart to know that NightFire is not a forgotten relic. NightFire really built so well on the Bond games that preceded it to create an unrivaled experience to that point, and maybe even to this point. It made you feel like you really were James Bond playing through one of his cinematic adventures. The original story really helps you immerse yourself in this particular world. When a game is based on a film, you already know the plot, you know how it's going to play out, you might try to recreate moments from the film yourself, and that's all well and good and fun in its own way, but NightFire feels like a truly interactive Bond game experience because, well, on a first play, it feels like you're really driving the story forward and you don't know where it's gonna go. Now, caveat again, this is far from being some in-depth narrative experience. It is pot-boiler Bond stuff for the most part, utilizing the tropes we know and expect, but to see those elements play out in video game form, particularly at that time, was kind of revolutionary. This game had a cinematic polish that no previous Bond game had, and I think that really helps this one feel special to a lot of Bond fans. As well as that polish, I do want to say that I think that the game is just incredibly well designed too. I mean, the levels are a blast to play through. There's a great blend of first-person action, on-rails shooting, and driving levels that mean that there's a great diversity to the gameplay, and that makes this super easy just to pick up and play a couple of levels for half an hour every once in a while to this day. NightFire was the most exciting individual Bond game release I have ever experienced, particularly when it came to thinking about what could possibly come next. NightFire had it all and then some. It's a quality product that clearly had a lot of love and care go into it. EA Games were responsible for publishing a few games that I'd hold up as being examples of brilliant ways to transition the James Bond character into the video game format. NightFire is easily one of those and the top of the list for me. It is my favorite Bond game, as well as just one of my favorite games of all time, and I look forward to playing it over and over and over again for at least the next 20 years. And if you want to be one of the first to know when I do publish my 40th anniversary tribute to the game, please do scroll below and click the subscribe and the Mrs. Bell notification buttons, and give it a couple of decades, it'll come. But seriously, I do plan on making more in-depth Bond game reviews like this, so if you have enjoyed this video and want to stay up to date on future uploads, then please do subscribe to the channel. And also, please do let me know your own thoughts about NightFire in the comments section below. Do you love the game as much as I do, or do you think it's overrated? We was traumatized by Dominique's death as I was? Please do let me know below. And with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.